Hi, this is a ranking that South Africa stood for the whole continent. They actually represented the continent on a global ranking, and also not just only for Africa, but for South Africa themselves. I would say this is actually a country or a government that cares about the future generation. The name is Vidashi, and welcome to African Time. Well, see what South Africa is doing. Let's go. Okay, so recently, the Spectator Index, another page on X, they are actually good with indexing. They are always talking about global rankings concerning how the world is performing, either good or bad. Any ranking you want, global spectator index or the spectator index got you sorted. Okay. Now recently they have shared something, and the whole world in Africa are saying, "Wow." Well, see this. It says, government spending on education as share of GDP. Okay, so they are saying that based on every GDP or year budget rate or their GDP, that is how much a government has spent on education. The list was actually labeled, and then the source to this information that they shared was from the World Bank. I always share my source though, so that you know that we are actually not playing here. So we mean business. Okay, now see. So government spending on education as share of GDP. Number one on the list is South Africa. South Africa is said to share about 6.2% of their GDP on only education. Number two is Brazil, 5.8%. Number three is Australia, 5.6%. Number four is USA, 5.4%. Number five is UK, 5.3%. And number six is France, 5.2%. And number seven is India, 4.6%. And number eight is Mexico, 4.6%. And number nine is Germany, 4.5%. Number 10 is Italy, 4.1%. Number 11 is Russia, 3.7%. Number 12 is China, 3.3%. Number 13 is Indonesia, 3%. And at number 15 is Turkey with 2.8%. Now, this list is how much a GDP government has spent on only education. And South Africa is said to be the highest country that spends a lot on the education. That is about 6.2% of their GDP on only education, the highest in Africa. And not only just in Africa, but the world at large. That is what I call a government that cares of the future generation. That actually shows you how the South African minds are. These people are actually learned, and almost everybody in South Africa is not illiterate. They actually knows what they are doing and what they are saying. That is beautiful to see. But I was actually shocked to see South Africa actually investing hugely in education than countries like China, USA, the UK, the Italy, and also the France. Yo, South Africa, do you know how great this is? You guys are the leading in education spending or spending per GDP in the world. Not just Africa, but in the world. You are actually suppressing countries like China, India. Yo, no, seriously. These people are big guys. They are about 1 billion plus population, and you guys are spending more than them. How cool is the South African education system is? I want to see how. Because I know I've shared a video about the South African top universities or the African's top universities, top 20. And then it was top 30 though. South Africa had about 21 universities in the top 30 in Africa. Top 30 universities in Africa. South Africa had about 21 of them. So that should actually now the question is, why am I even surprised now? Because come to think of it, yeah, if these guys actually did that, why am I even surprised with this list? Well, South Africa, that's cool. Well, let's continue with this. To broaden our studies and make things more interesting, I got this from the African narratives. Okay, the African narratives is a page on X that also mainly discuss Africa, just like I'm doing here, and it says top 10 African countries with the highest and lowest budget allocation for education. So the education budget as GDP between various periods. Okay, so they actually broaden our knowledge to know something cool about the African continent. Okay, now let's see this. So they are saying that top 10 African countries with the highest and lowest budgets allocation for education. Now let's see the highest first. Okay, so the highest is number one is Namibia. Namibia is said to spend about 10.03% of their GDP since from 1999 to 2022. Okay, they spend about 10% of their GDP on education in 1999 to 2022. Number two is Sierra Leone. They spent 9.44% on their GDP on education from 2000 to 2022. Number three is Lesotho. They spent 7.51% on the education since 1971 to 2022. Sorry. Let's go. Number 4 is Mozambique. Mozambique spends about 7% on the education, that is from 1998 to 2021. And in South Africa, being number 5 here, spends about 6.5% on the education from 1987 to 2022. Number 6 is Algeria. They spent 6.3% on the education from 1979 to 2021. Okay, and then number 7 is Cape Verde. Cape Verde spent about 6.04% on their GDP on education from 1998 to 2021. Number 8 is Seychelles, spent 5.62% on their GDP on education from 1970 to 2022. We have Morocco, and then lastly have Rwanda, spending about 5.59% on from 1977 to 2022 on education. So these are Africa's highest spenders on education by the GDP in some period of time. Okay, that is about 20 years period of time. That is actually impressive, though. These people actually invested for the past 20 years about more than 5% of their GDP on only education. That is massive. Now let's see this. This is Africa's lowest country that actually contributes or allocates lowest amount of their GDP to education. So number 1 is Mauritania. Number 2 is Central African Republic. Number 3 is Guinea. Number 4, Comoros. Number 5, Angola. Number 6, Libya. Number 6 is Liberia. Yeah. Number 7 is Uganda. Number 8 is Democratic Republic of the Congo. Number 9 is Gabon, and at number 10 is Cameroon. So these countries here listed here are said to be your lowest spenders or budget allocation or GDP allocation to education in the time period. That is mostly the time period from 1987 to 2022. That is about 20 years, somehow about 30 years period, but it's actually pretty low here. Concerning the time range, some have from 1997 to 2022 is wild. Some is even as far as 1971 to 2022 is wild too. Okay, so that is how your lowest African spenders on education are. Hope you have learned something here. Now let's see this. So by the African narrative, they says let's share some more source or some more information about the source to this information. So they says UNESCO cites various factors behind the low education budgets in many African countries. Now this is it. So the source to this information is from the UNESCO. So the UNESCO says cites various factors behind the low education budgets in many African countries, including debts, economic instability, inflation, reliance on foreign aid, and competing priorities and governance issue. Now this is it. They say that the reasons why these African countries have lowest GDP to sponsor their education is number 1 is including their debts rates. 2 is economic instability. Yeah, war-torn countries. I said war is not good for war is not good for any economy. Okay, or any government is not good, or any country is not good. Okay, they also say inflation. Yep. Reliance on the foreign aids. Some countries are only there just waiting for foreign aids. That is too bad. And also competing priorities. And then lastly is governance issues. So these are the reasons that actually affected these countries to have that poor spending or allocation of the GDP to education. So there you have it. Okay, but the most important thing we are discussing right now is that South Africa is said to be your highest spenders on education or budget or GDP allocation for education in the world, not just Africa, mind you, but in the world. There are surpassing countries like the USA, the Chinese, the Indians, countries like the UK's. South Africa is topping this one. They are actually investing heavily on their next generation. The name is Russia, and I'm so proud of my South Africans. Hope Africa can actually develop our population and the people, and also enhance our way of thinking and equip us more knowledgeable things in our heads so that we can actually make Africa great. The name is Russia, this is African Time. Thank you for your time.